is Monday Message, and I want to talk about prayer. Prayer is a huge part of faith because it's how we connect to God, it's how we talk to God. But one of the things in prayer that I've always struggled with is the idea of, do I get to pray for what I want, or do I just only pray for God's will? The truth is, I don't always know God's will, and I'm always striving to know more of His will. But sometimes I'm a human, and there's things that I want, or I think I want, or I think are going to better me, and they truthfully aren't. So should I get to pray for those, or should I only pray for God's will? Should I say those specific prayers? Let's look at the Bible to kind of help us out. Mark 7:7 says, ask and you shall receive. And if you take that at face value, it looks like you can just go to God, like you go to Santa Claus and just have like a list of things that you want. You're like, okay, God, give me this, this, and this, and you'll get it. 1 John 5:14 takes it a little bit further, and it says that if it's according to God's will, then He hears you. And if He hears you, then you can rest assured that He's going to give it to you. But that's according to His will. If we go back to Matthew in chapter 6, He's talking about how the Pharisees praise, and He tells us not to do that. But He also points out that God already knows what's on our heart, so we might as well ask Him because God already knows. But that still leaves me with the question, am I allowed to pray for what I want, or should I just pray for God's will? And I think the answer is both, and I get that from Jesus, because of how Jesus chose to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane before His crucifixion. You can see this story in different Gospels, but I'm personally going to choose to read it from Mark chapter 14, verse 36. He says, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but you will. So if we break this apart, first, we see that Jesus is asking for something. He says, take this cup from me. God already knows your hearts. He knows your wants and your desires, so you might as well go to God and ask. But then Jesus quickly follows up with, not my will, but yours. And I think that's where it's really important for us. We are allowed to go to God with requests. We're allowed to go to God with specific prayers. We're allowed to ask Him. He wants us to ask Him. And a little spoiler, a lot of times if things are really brewing on your heart, it's because God has put that on your heart. He wants you to ask Him because He wants to bless you with it. He wants you to seek Him to give you what He's laid on your heart. So a lot of times it really is in His will. But then we have to be okay with His will being done. If our wants don't align with His will, then we have to be okay with His will taking place and becoming the most important thing. Him saying no because it's not His will is something that's really hard for us to hear, but it's something that we have to be content with. I was talking to a group of Christians not too long ago about this, so I know I'm not the only Christian who had the question, do you pray specifically or do you pray for just His will? But my husband likened it back to my favorite verse, or story, which is about Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. So in Daniel, they are in the midst of denying King Nebuchadnezzar what he wants. They are not going to worship King Nebuchadnezzar. They are not going to deny their God or put him second or do any of that. In this story, they say that we will not bow down to you and we trust that our God will deliver us from this fire. So they're asking God to deliver him from the fire. Then they say, even if delivering us from the fire is not God's will, we're still going to honor Him. And I think that's how we need to approach our prayer life when it comes to asking for things. He is not Santa Claus. He's not just going to give you everything you want because you ask for it, but He does want you to seek Him, and He does want you to ask, and He wants you to be specific, and He wants you to come with Him, to Him. But we as humans have to realize that what we want may not always be what God wants.